That's the longest minute. Good evening. Call this meeting of the Johnson City Board of Commissioners to order for Thursday, September 7th, 2017. If you will, please stand for the invocation given by Rob Aubrey, Campus Ministry, Crossroads Christian Church, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And it looks like
I'll do it.
Commissioner Wise will be doing our invocation. Thank you.
Gracious God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together as citizens of this fine city. We pray that you will bless all those who are here with a spirit of cooperation and goodwill towards one another. We pray all this in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we get started tonight, I'd just like to take a second and offer our prayers for the folks in the path of the previous path and the future path of Hurricane Irma. It looks like a terrible situation down there. I know that there may be a point in time we'll be asked to do something, and I know the city will stand ready to help as we can. But just hope everybody will keep those folks in their prayers. And selfishly, I would ask you to keep my sister, Julie, in your prayers. She's the bird curator of the Tampa Lowry Park Zoo, and she's battened in with her animals and her staff, and they're not leaving. So I told her to keep in touch. She said, I'll keep in touch as long as we have cell service. So I hope they keep cell service up there. So, Mr. Peterson?
Your first order of business is consideration of your minutes from the meeting held Thursday, August 17th.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Ms. Jennings, call the roll.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Wise,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
This will take us to proclamations, resolutions, and presentations. The first being proclamation recognizing Mr. Samuel Miller. If we could ask Mr. Miller and his son and grandson to come forward, please.
Yes. Yeah, come on up here.
Well, good evening, Ms. Get our directives first. Mr. Miller, it is my pleasure to read this proclamation for you. We're kind of kin, but not really. We do sort of favor each other a little bit. But whereas Samuel B. Miller, who celebrated his 92nd birthday on September 4th, is a lifelong resident of Johnson City. He graduated from Science Hill High School in 1943 before serving with honor as a signalman in the United States Navy during World War II. He had completed his law degree at the University of Tennessee and returned to Johnson City in the early 1950s. And whereas Mr. Miller was one of the founding partners of Weller and Miller attorneys in Johnson City and was chief counsel for some of the area's largest banking and industrial companies, including Hamilton Bank, I always remember my Apple Annie card, now SunTrust Bank and TPI Corporation. And whereas Mr. Miller has contributed to his community in countless ways, including serving as chairman of the board of the Johnson City Medical Center during construction of the hospital on State of Franklin Road, serving 20 years on the board of directors of the Tri-City Airport Commission during the planning and construction of the new terminal building in 1965, serving as attorney and counsel to Johnson City Health and Educational Facilities Board for more than 40 years, serving as president of the Johnson City Lions Club, an international secular non-political service organization dedicated to meeting community needs, serving as president of the Johnson City Country Club, serving on the building committee of the First United Methodist Church during the planning and construction of the educational annex, and teaching Morse code to local Boy Scouts. There are not a whole lot of people that can do that these days, are there? And whereas Mr. Miller not only represented or advised some of the most important enterprises to develop and thrive in the Tri-Cities area, but also enjoyed a unique life here at home, rearing and educating 6 children. Now, therefore, I, David Tomita, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, hereby thank Samuel B. Miller for his commitment to our community, devoting his time with a servant's heart. His talents, expertise, and knowledge have made a lasting impact for the greater good. And there you are. We're very, very proud to have you here tonight and wish you all the best. And I think we got some folks here who want to take a picture.
I would like to thank you
Would you like to make some comments?
for all of the suggestions. I don't have any comments to make because I'm so pleased and also appalled at the many things that you have said in my behalf.
Yes.
That next one we'll read like this. Hope it didn't say anything bad.
It's been confused for the last number of years. Thank you. All of you, more than I
Thank you for all you have done for the city, Mr. Samuel.
thank you. Doesn't seem like so.
It is.
It's a whole lot of beer to eat.
It's a good city.
All right, all right.
Thanks, Sam. Mayor, your next order of business is a proclamation recognizing Suicide Prevention Month.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are
Very
you?
good. Well, we're happy to read this proclamation to you. Got to say, this one hits kind of hard. I had a brother who committed suicide in 1982.
I'm so sorry.
So we certainly know the impact on families from suicide. So whereas suicide is one of the most disruptive and tragic events a family and community can experience, and awareness, education, and treatment are the keys to preventing further suffering and loss of life. And whereas approximately 30,000 Americans commit suicide every year with an average of one suicide every 16.2 minutes, and each of these suicides intimately affects at least 6 other people. And whereas, according to the Tennessee Department of Health, suicide is the 10th leading cause of all deaths in our state, and veterans, active duty military personnel, and National Guardsmen face a disappropriate risk compared to the general population, with more dying from suicide than combat. That's horrific. Whereas, Tennessee is a national leader in the effort to prevent suicide, being one of the first states to develop a suicide prevention and evaluation plan. Now, therefore, I, David Tomita, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, in conjunction with the State and National Awareness Initiative, do hereby proclaim September 2017 Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in Johnson City, and urge our citizens to learn about the risk factors and warning signs that may help prevent suicide and the devastation it creates for those affected by these tragedies. And here you are.
Thank you.
Like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm Heather Lee Sifford. I'm the Injury Prevention Coordinator for the Trauma Department over at Johnson City Med Center, and I work with the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network doing QPR trainings for them. So I provide those trainings for any organization or group in our area. So we appreciate your all support so much. Thank you.
And I'm Sarah Lovelace. I also am part of the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network. I work for the Washington County Health Department as well, and I work very closely with Heather Lee, doing different suicide prevention activities around the community. One we have coming up in Greenville, and I'll let Heather Lee tell you a little bit more about that.
So we have a walk in Greenville at the Capitol Theater on September 23rd, and that's a Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. We're going to be doing a walk in memory of those that have lost their life to suicide. So any family members and friends are welcome to come down there and walk in memory of your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, your next order of business is a proclamation recognizing Constitution Week.
Well, I could have guessed who was here for that one.
DAR is here.
That's right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, I know you. I know. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for being here tonight. It's my pleasure to read this, if I can see it, read this proclamation. Whereas September 17th, or 2017 marks the 230th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas our founding fathers gathered in Philadelphia and produced a charter establishing 3 separate branches of government with systems of checks and balances among them, and whereas, because we as Americans are united by the ideals of equal justice, it is fitting to remember the vision of the Constitution's framers to build a free society and to celebrate the historical document they created to achieve that goal. And whereas we come together on Constitution Day and Citizen Day, or Citizenship Day, and during Constitution Week to recognize the blessings bestowed upon our great nation and to recommit ourselves to making the United States a more perfect union. Now therefore I, David Tomita, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, in conjunction with the National Observant by joint resolution of Congress Public Law 915, do hereby proclaim September 17th through the 23rd, 2017 as Constitution Week in Johnson City, Tennessee, and encourage our citizens and leaders of civic, social, and educational organizations to reaffirm the ideas that our founding fathers signed to paper in 1787 and to make a renewed commitment to our rights and responsibilities as citizens of this great nation. And there you are.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I'll hand this and let you introduce yourselves, but I would like to say this really struck home. Commissioner Fowler, Mr. Peterson and I just returned from overseas, and nothing makes you appreciate what we've got here more than having that passport to get back into this country. And as much as people malign this country, they would give their right arm to be able to do what we do, to have our freedom here, and they want to be us. So, and that's why we are what we are. So, thank you very much for keeping that on the front burner.
Certainly.
Hi, I'm Carol Redmond. I represent State of Franklin chapter, which is based in Jonesboro. And although we represent the entire northeast section of the state for the DAR, we have a Constitution Week bell ringing. That's the kickoff for Constitution Week in our area. And that will be at Jonesboro, that Sunday the 17th, 1:30. It's behind the town hall there at the historic Oak Hill School. And bring your bells and bring your smile, and if you need to, bring a lawn chair. Because we have lots of school children involved, and we hope you will be also.
I'm Donna Hunter, the Regent of the Mary Patton chapter located in Irwin, and we appreciate the City of Johnson City proclaiming this week for Constitution Week. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Claire Oldham, Regent of the Ann Robertson chapter in Johnson City and part of the Northeast Tennessee Regents Council. Jonda is our president at this point, so she may want to say something.
My name is John DeBurdette. I'm the chairman of the Northeast Council of Regents, newly formed. We represent 5 counties, 8 chapters, and over 350 women in the Daughters of the American Revolution. And I'm also the regent of the John Sevier chapter, Sarah Hawkins chapter.
Thank you very much.
Commission, due to some scheduling conflicts, the next 3 proclamations we're going to defer for 2 weeks. That would be the PTA membership enrollment, the recognition of our firefighters that received life-saving awards, and an award that Joy Baker was presented with in recognition of her service in risk management. We had some last-minute things that conflicted with the schedule this evening, so we'll defer those for 2 weeks. That will take us to our next order of business, which is consideration of a temporary occasion license for Umoja United Committee to sell beer on September the 8th, 2017, at a Friday after 5 event in Founders Park. We would recommend your approval.
Very good. Is the petitioner here? Oh, hey, wait. If you would, step forward and give your name and address.
Wayne Robertson, 1300 East Oakland Avenue, Johnson City.
Very good, sir. Have you read the rules and regulations regarding the sale of beer in the city of Johnson City?
Oh, yes, I have.
Do you agree to abide by those rules?
Yes, I do.
And do you have any questions for us?
No, none that I know of. Do you have any questions of me?
Well, we'll ask you something here in a minute.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
A motion and a second. Any further questions, discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes. And if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your event.
We will be pouring beer at the big motorcycle event that's going on Friday night. We're really excited over this. Our city is going to be roaring, I think, over the weekend.
I believe it is. Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be a really, really good event.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We may just want to add a little additional comment that this is officially the Hot Bike Week weekend,
Correct.
and where it's anticipated at least 2,000 motorcyclists will be in town for a 3-day weekend in downtown. So a lot of activity, and I think they also have workshops and, what do you call it?
Competition.
The chop.
Making a motorcycle.
Yeah, they're making motorcycles, so we need to invite everybody to come down and take a stroll around and see these beautiful bikes that are going to be coming here.
And as you should always drive carefully and with a degree of awareness, please be aware of our two-wheeled vehicles in numbers this weekend. So keep an eye out for our visitors. Mr. Peterson?
Next order of business is consideration of a temporary occasion license for the Johnson City Brewing Company to sell beer on October the 27th at the All Fired Up event. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding no disqualifying factors. The recommendation is for approval.
I would imagine you are the petitioner. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Catherine Latham. I live at 1105 Sevier Street in Johnson City.
Very good.
And this is my partner in crime for this event.
I'm Kurt Bennett. I'm the Vice President of the Johnson City Firefighters Association, and we'll let you know what we're teaming up to do here in a second.
Very good. Have you read the rules and regulations regarding the sale of alcohol in the city of Johnson City?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree to abide by those rules?
Yes.
Do you have any questions for us?
No, sir.
Do we have any questions for the petition?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes. There we go. Now, if you'd like to tell us about your event.
Sure. So it's going to be out at the warehouse, which we still have not had a successful event out there yet because of the weather, but I'm determined this is going to be the one. So it's all fired up. It's going to be a fundraiser for the union, firefighters union, who raise money to buy winter coats for the kids in the city. And so we're going to have live music. There's going to be some like scary zombie crazy people walking around. There's going to be obviously beer. And we're making a special mango jalapeno beer for the occasion. And there will be events and special things that people can do to help fund some more money towards getting these coats. So we're really excited to partner with these guys. But I wanted him to be able to tell you a little bit about what they're doing.
I don't know if anybody is familiar with Operation Warm. It was started in 2004. The International Association of Firefighters got involved with it, and since 2005, I think they've given out 325,000 coats nationwide. We did this event in 2014 and 15. Between those 2 years, it was 425 coats we gave out to Coalition for Kids. We plan on giving out about 180 to 200 coats this time, and that will benefit the Boys and Girls Club this time.
Very good. Thanks very much. Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commission, at this time, we would like to ask you to add to the agenda consideration of a temporary occasion license for the Blue Plum Organization to sell beer on September the 15th and September the 29th at the Founders After Five event. As I understand it, you had approved for them to do this on a night where it got rained out, and this is a reschedule due to a rain out. Am I remembering that right, Ms. Camp?
That's correct.
Move to add to the agenda.
We have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tumita?
Yes.
And now, consideration of the request by Blue Plum to
No,
sell
that
beer.
wasn't it.
You're
We
not
just added
done.
it to the agenda.
Get more.
Now we have it.
More
Now we
work.
can.
The actual request is in front of you. The reviews have been made. The recommendation is for approval.
Would you please state your name and address for the
Diana
record?
Cantler, 300 East Main.
And have you read the rules and regulations regarding the sale of alcohol in the city of Johnson City?
Yes, sir.
And do you
This
agree?
time?
This time?
This time,
for this time?
this
Yes.
time.
Okay.
Yes. They have changed a little, do you agree to abide by those rules?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any questions for us?
No, sir.
And I can't believe you're coming back.
Well,
We
and I
gave you a
apologize.
chance,
I
and you-
the Blue Plum Board, I told them, I said, you really need to send someone else, and it's one person's birthday, and 3 of them are out of town, and 2 are picking up children, so you're stuck with my
Again.
body
Always available.
again.
Well, very good. So this is a rerun.
Yes, yes. So we have 4 weeks remaining in Founders After Five. So if you haven't been downtown on a Friday night recently, come out to Founders After Five and enjoy. This coming week, we have 2 bands, both bluegrass, and then we've got 3 different other bands in the following weeks.
So you have both kinds of music, country and western.
Yes,
Right? Very good.
country and western.
All right, well, good
And
luck. Thank you.
Do we need to?
Oh,
Make a
have we
motion?
voted?
I move for approval.
Second.
Yeah. Oops. We have a motion to second. How about a roll call? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tumita?
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Your next order of business is consideration of a street closure for KLH Inc., doing business as the Goose Chase, to accommodate the Bluegrass Half Marathon. This is an annual event following the annual route, and we would recommend your approval.
Please,
Very good.
please.
Although we know you, just state your name and address for the record.
Karen Hubbs, 916 Althea Street, Johnson City, Tennessee, 37604.
Okay.
I mean, 1. I don't know where I live.
Yeah. Move to deny.
Thanks, David.
Yeah. Any questions?
Are you KLH Incorporated?
Yes, but I go as the Goose Chase.
Legal.
Okay, I got you.
Legally,
I got you.
DBA.
I got you.
Yeah.
Any other
For
questions?
approval.
Okay. Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tumita?
Yes.
How many are signed
Thank
up
you.
this year?
Well, we're probably going to hit around 600, we're guessing. So it's still a pretty good amount. But as you know, we highlight ETSU Bluegrass, and we have bluegrass throughout the course. And unlike a lot of the other races that we work on, we need about 75 people for the course alone just to work the street corners and different things. So we are looking for a few volunteers. And we have a great volunteer coordinator that gets them all fired up. I swear they could be a cheerleader for ETSU after they leave. They're so excited. But we try to make the course real fun because, you know, it is Johnson City. It's not super flat, but we go through the prettiest areas of Johnson City. And Vice Mayor Brock actually helped us with that course at the very beginning. That was 8 years ago, believe it or not.
I'll give you 2 volunteers.
Yes,
3.
yes.
3.
And the first year was we had a 100-year rainstorm. That was a memorable time, to say the least. And we originally started over by ETSU and the Carnegie, but now we finished at the Founders Park, and we think that's going to be our new home. It's a great place and a great location, so thank you for providing those facilities for us. We are going to start out the Bluegrass Half Marathon weekend on Friday, the 22nd, with a kids race, and we are encouraging the kids to run a mile every day leading up to the race, and it's actually a fun run for just a mile, and we call it the last mile fun kids run, and we're going to do it before Founders at 5, or after 5, excuse me, and Olson's Martial Arts is going to be the title sponsor for that race.
And the winning school, we're going to follow the turkey trot lead here, and we're going to give the winning school a little bit of cash, and they get a party at Olson's Martial Arts at the end of the race for all those that participate, and that will be for the first, second, and third. So if you want to get some energy out of some kids, this is the race for you. So, but thank you, and they can go to bluegrasshalfmarathon.com.
Yeah, I have a senior in high school who needs some hours, so.
Yes,
I'll ship you.
yes, we do give community service hours.
I'll ship you her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isabel, I know you're not looking, but guess what? Mark your
Guess what you're doing
calendar.
September 24th.
I'm sure she is.
Yeah, I'm sure she's on her phone watching me. Thank you, good luck.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
Your next order of business is consideration of a street closure from the American Cancer Society to accommodate the Making Strides Against Breast Cancer 5K to be held from 2:30 to 5:30 on Sunday, October the 22nd. The recommendation is for approval.
Very good. State your name and address for the record, please.
Holly Booker, 1122 Huffine Road, Johnson City, Tennessee.
Very good. Do we have any questions? Do we have a motion?
I move approval.
How about a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Jennings, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes. Well, would you like to tell us about your event?
Yeah, Making Strides Against Breast Cancer is our American Cancer Society's breast cancer 5K. We're going into our 6th year this year and our 3rd year at Founders Park. We have changed the route a little bit, and I'm really excited. We'll be closing off State of Franklin, and the start line will be almost in front of Tupelo Honey, and we're anticipating about 4,000 people this year. So if you want a really good time, we have a really great DJ, really great MC, and we're going to have a lot of fun. The theme this year is Be a Hero of Hope. If you haven't registered, you can go to cancer.org and look it up. And if you donate $25 before this Saturday, you can get a pink cape to wear. So I encourage everyone to do that. You can wear your pink cape and be a hero of hope on October 22nd. It will be a lot of fun this year. And this year we have incorporated a timed portion. We Run Events is helping us do that. So it'll also be a really good prelude to the turkey trot. If you want to warm up for that, you can come to your 5K with us.
Well, it is coming up, isn't it? And you've extended it to 2.5 hours, which would allow me to.
Yeah, you have plenty of time to finish.
But with
Before
the
they
pink
close.
cape, you'll pick up some speed.
You can.
That's
you
right.
can-
Yeah.
What is that when you draft off of people? Pick up
I might actually wear a pink cape.
I will give the $25 if you will give the pink, if you.
You'll pay us.
We are still recruiting real men. If you wanted to do that, we're looking for a few real men wear pink who would wear pink for the month of October.
Please
You
get
can reach
Commissioner
out to me
Wise's
if it's
credit
something
card
you're
number
interested
and pay my entry fee, and I'll be there.
I got cash.
I got cash is good, too. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we vote on that?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Your next order of business is a street closure request from the Science Hill Band Boosters to accommodate the Hilltopper Invitational Marching Competition between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. We would recommend your approval of the request.
Well, this looks like somewhat of a radical group, but if you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure, it's John Toms, 512 Swadley Road, Johnson City.
All right, do we have any questions?
Move for approval?
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tomita?
Yes. Would you like to tell us about your event?
Sure, this is the 5th or 6th year we're going to be having it. It's at the end of October on a Saturday. We're going to be having hopefully about 20 bands from around the area, some perhaps as far away as Virginia, come in and basically have a big band competition. And we just need the roads closed so that, because we're going to have kids and students and bands transporting around just the area. It's just right around Liberty Bell is the primary roads that it's concerned with. But it just makes it easier so people don't have to dodge cars. So,
Very good. Well, good luck.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Very successful.
Your next request is from Girls on the Run of Northeast Tennessee to accommodate their event to be held from 5 a.m. to noon on Saturday, December the 2nd. The review has been made and the recommendation is for approval.
Very good.
Hey, we got
evening.
both of us this time.
That's right.
I'm Ani Boyd, Jessica Thomas, and we are the co-council directors for Girls on the Run.
Do we have any questions? Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes. Now, if you'd like to sing us something about your event, that would be great.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Just
It's usually
say, we're
like
okay
rock,
with
paper,
that.
scissors.
Yeah.
So Girls on the Run is a character development program for girls in 3rd through 8th grade, and it's a 10-week program that culminates with a 5K run. So this will be not only a place for our girls in our fall program to do their 5K run, but it's also one of our major fundraisers. So it's open to anyone to run, but we will have about 550 to 600 girls, many of them doing their first 5K ever. So. And they're from all over 10 counties, so we cover the 8 eastern counties of Northeast Tennessee and then 2 in Southwest Virginia.
Thank you.
An awesome program, and we wish you well. We did not.
Did we get our parking worked out?
No, not yet. We're
Okay,
working
I
on
think
it.
there's a plan for it, though.
Hopefully.
The next item of business is a request from Girls on the Run for their event to be held on May the 5th, 2008. Again, the recommendation is for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Same thing as for our spring girls. So we just figured we'd knock it out in one meeting.
Very good. Thanks for the advance
Yeah.
thinking.
Way to plan ahead.
Yes. We try. We try. Thank you.
Well, good luck with that one, too. Yep.
At this time, we would like to ask you to add to the agenda the emergency fuel procurement policy or agreement. As you may or may not be aware, as a result of Hurricane Harvey, the fuel supplies have been greatly interrupted. Our usual point of pickup has been Knoxville off of the Colonial Pipeline. That pipeline was closed for a period of time, making fuel unavailable at that location. Tim Henley has worked very hard to find other providers at other locations to provide us fuel during the pipeline closure. The pipeline is slowly coming back online. The refineries are starting to come back online, but we expect to continue to see interrupted service for some time moving forward. Obviously, if the hurricane forecasters are incorrect and Hurricane Irma should get into the Gulf, we could expect prolonged disruptions to the normal fuel supply. As you all are fully aware, fuel is mission critical to us, so we always, when we get into the hurricane season and periods when we expect interruptions, we work real hard to make sure that we have uninterrupted supplies. This has resulted in us having to pay more than what we are under contract to pay for fuel. But in light of the emergency situation, we would recommend your approval on it. Should you decide to add this to the agenda tonight, please.
All right, do I have a motion to add it to the agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? And Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
And at this time, we would ask you to give consideration to the emergency fuel agreement.
Now, is this as a result of the impending hurricane, or is this more the refinery outages in Houston?
This is the refinery outages in Houston.
Yeah, we've gotten several calls and emails from some residents about the sort of meteoric increase in gasoline. I think it's important to know that we don't set the price of gasoline. We don't regulate the price of gasoline. The market regulates the price of gasoline, and there are precious few refineries left. I don't think they've built one since the 70s, and if a couple go out, that's a disruption of the supply, and that's what I think we've seen happening now. I guess oil, we have plenty of oil. You just can't run oil in your car. You have to turn it into gasoline. If we have some disruption in the Gulf, that might affect oil prices. So just so people are aware of that.
And those same fluctuations in fuel prices affect us just like they do the general public. Yes, sir.
Peterson, I got here a little bit late this evening, so I only got a chance to glance at the document. Is there a time limit on this? Is it specified in the document?
There is, don't see Tim Henley here. Yes, Tim
Here he
is
is.
here.
Thirty days, it looks like there's a net 30 days terms.
30 days.
Yes, sir.
Is there a limit time-wise as to how long he can charge these extra fees to accomplish this? I want to make sure that if we're paying extra money, it's in fact due to the hurricane shutting down refineries and not due to a period of time that, in fact, we should be expecting a lesser price.
Right now, unless Hurricane Irma does something drastic, I would think within the next 7 to 10 days, we would be back to normal pricing.
But there's no limitation in this contract, should there be?
I don't know the answer to that. That would be purchasing's question. I'm not for sure
Mr.
about that.
Peterson?
This is actually an agreement to allow us to buy fuel under this arrangement so long as we have to. When prices go back to normal, we will go back to the old contract.
We would just indicate that we did not wish to purchase under this price if that offer was made to us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And we do have a new contract coming up. It's on the,
Move to approve the emergency fuel agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any other questions?
So if you had so pricing goes back to normal, and then Irma hits and disrupts it again, you'd have to do another emergency move like this?
Forever. If Irma goes up the East Coast, it's probably not going to impact the Colonial Pipeline, and it's very unlikely that we would see the extreme disruptions that we've seen now. In answer to your question, this is to get us through this situation now. When things go back to normal, we won't use this anymore. And
another
should a
disruption.
subsequent disruption occur, we would then have to sit down and negotiate with the suppliers what price we would have to pay for the delivery of fuel based upon those current circumstances. So this is just to get us through the current situation with the hurricane that went through Texas.
So you will have to come back to us again if something else happens.
If something else happens, we would have to come back to you for a similar approval. Yes, sir.
It's good to be king. When you got it and everybody wants it.
So in that example, the king would be the person with all the oil.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Believe me. Just wanted to be clear.
Your next item is consideration.
We need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought it voted.
That's okay.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Tamita?
Yes.
Now you can go. Fourth and aye.
It's good to be the queen.
Consideration of the consent agenda, please.
All right, Commissioner Fowler, anything you'd like to pull for discussion?
I do not have anything to pull.
Vice Mayor Brock?
I just want to pull A5 just for recognition purposes only.
A6, please.
And Commissioner Wise?
I have nothing to pull.
Okay. All right, A5?
We have members of the Disabled Veterans Group here today, and I'm real pleased with what we as the city are going to be able to do. Mr. Stahl, do you want to kind of present what we're doing? And we have new neighbors, and we're real pleased to have them here next to City Hall, and what we're going to be able to do for the, I think it's particularly fitting because this is Constitution Week.
Correct.
And we have the people who have fought for that Constitution here tonight, so.
This is a proposal to consider leasing a lot that the city owns, enter into a lease agreement with the Disabled American Veterans for a parking lot that's between 405 and 407 East Market Street. This is actually directly behind Fire Station 3 and adjacent to the Disabled American Veterans facility. This lot was acquired by the city some years ago. It was improved slightly, gravelled, and it's used on a periodic basis by fire department personnel for parking. It's also being used right now for parking by adjacent property owners such as the disabled American veterans. They approached us that they would like to formally just enter into agreement with us to use the lot, have a formal agreement. And, they proposed leasing it for $1 for a lease term of 20 years. And they acknowledged that the city would be allowed to continue using the lot, would work with the city to ensure that their use would not be interfering with city operations, and checking with their schedule. In my judgment, it would not interfere. They do have some meetings from time to time, but as far as their use of the lot, would not interfere with the city operations, and the fire department personnel could largely continue to use the lot, park there if necessary, and I think it would be a positive working relationship. We do grant the DAB the right to repair, pave, stripe for parking, install signage, and initiate other improvements on the gravel lot to facilitate their entry and access to their adjacent facility. We would both agree to keep the lot free of debris and trash, working collectively. We would provide, it is our lot, it would remain our lot, we would continue to provide routine maintenance to the lot as required, and may initiate other improvements to the lot or in our discretion. And the DAB agrees not to assign or sublet the lot to any third party, and of course provide adequate liability insurance to the city. And so we, in looking at this, and you can see by the overhead diagram, where it's situated, if you didn't know already, we think it's an opportunity to allow them better access to the property, allow them the discretion to make improvements, and still allow us use as we have been using it and working with them at the same time. So I think it's a positive. They've already given a check for $1. Should you, in your judgment, approve this lease? And
Well, that was pretty darn presumptuous.
and I do working with them and talking with these folks. They have a good group, and I recommend favorable consideration of this lease.
Very good. We're happy to be able to do that. I think that those discussions, I can't remember what we were there for.
Well, for their grand opening, we went to.
That's right, grand opening, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I don't think we're going to lose much. The picture shows nothing on that lot, and I think every time I've driven by, so I hope to see a lot of your members out there, and I hope to see you using it, that helps you with your access to the side of the building. We are more than pleased to do that and appreciate, thank you for your service. Do I have a motion? Or that is part of the consent agenda. A6.
A6 is consider a certificate of substantial completion for Burwell Construction Company on the Freedom Hall Civic Center pool area renovations and additions project. The reason I pulled it, Mr. Peterson, there's a pretty significant punch list that's attached that none of it had been completed as of August 14th. Want to make sure that the punch list has been completed, in particular, getting the fire alarm system operational.
Commissioner, this actually is an ongoing list, and at the time, some of these items, and to your point, I will confirm about the fire alarm to be sure that is underway, if not complete already, but some of these activities are ongoing right now, including complete painting of the ceilings in the lobby and the office area. We identified that when we had our site inspection and added that to the list, and also replacing, there were some exit doors that were missing some parts, and we feel that may have preceded the construction project, but nevertheless was there at the time it was ongoing. So we've added that to the list as well. And also, painting the door at the Southwest office was underway, and touching up coating on conduits and hollow frame doors as well. So the one item that I will confirm is, and the most important on this list, of course, is the fire alarm, but all these items were being addressed and at least initiated
Okay,
since.
is there any rush in going ahead with granting the certificate of substantial completion? I mean, I'd really like to make sure that that fire alarm is operational before we have any kids in there.
Jason, can you get a hold of one of the fire prevention folks and ask them if they've signed off on it? School's open, the pool's occupied.
Oh, the pool's already occupied?
It is. I can't tell you for sure that it's operational and signed off on, but the fire prevention folks are really good about checking all that before they let schools to start and continue.
Well, I guess
So
deferring
if you could-
consideration won't accomplish anything then, but that's one of those things that I think in the future, we should not allow anybody to be occupying space until alarm systems are operational. So.
Yes, sir.
And as Ms. Peterson said, it very well could have been approved. It just at the time, it was ongoing when this list was prepared.
Yeah,
So
I hope that it is.
I like to say
I hope-
it's completed, but I can't. I mean, I just don't know.
I hope that it has been. If it hasn't, if we can light a little bit of a fire under Burwell to get that done.
Yeah, I know it's a work in progress, so it hasn't been, so I know it was moving
Just
forward.
all in all, how did the pool project go? I mean, when you
In my
walk in-
judgment, excellent. I think it was long overdue, and it needed to be, upgraded. Complete painting is, if you visit it today, you'll see, first impression, it's pretty obvious what's happened. Also, city staff, Sam Miller, who was just up here with his grandfather a few moments ago, also Park and Rec staff did in-house work related to the starting blocks, diving board, related railings, ladders, and did a lot of work that was not directly related to this project, just to spruce it up. So window cleaning, debris removal. So overall, it was a long overdue project, and the end result, I think, was tremendous. And I can't say enough how needed it was, but if you visit it, you'll know what we're talking about.
I do have a comment, and I guess we can count it as a critical comment from the swim team, that their mural was painted over. I don't know how old that mural was, but the whales on the one wall are now a stark white wall. So-
That is true. There was some discussion on that. I think it's a number of years old. I believe from the contractors looking at it, it would have to be repainted entirely. It was not, there was some discussion about whether it could be saved. I think it was pretty much indicated that they were at the critical nature. It's either going to have to be painted entirely or whole wall repainted, and the latter was
What
done.
really drove that was there was degradation of the wall behind it. There was block that had to be replaced and mortar that had to be repaired and this and that, and it disrupted a significant portion of that. And Coach Turner and I thought Coach Coraggio were both consulted before the decision was made to paint over that.
These comments came from well below their pay grade.
Okay.
Kind of like swimmers.
We tried to be sensitive to talk to the swim coach.
We did
and
speak with the
athletic
coaches, that's true.
I'm not going to name any names, but one of them does have the same dress as I do.
Yes.
They could do something
Yeah.
else.
Accurate statements.
So also, just the status of the concession stands and the corridors upstairs, is that?
Ongoing right now. Matter of fact, the interior concourse in the arena has been addressed. They proceeded into the exterior concourse as well as the concession stands, and I think the work I've seen so far is very impressive and noticeably an improvement as well. So
Good. Well, I think that's going to end up being a good investment. We've gotten a lot of good feedback, and I'm excited to see where we are now. Whale mural or no whale mural?
I think you will find the work on the floor is as big a game changer as putting the new seats in, aesthetically. It's a significant difference.
All right, any other comments? Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Ms. Jennings, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4649-17, an ordinance authorizing the conveyance of a portion of the right-of-way along Mount Castle Drive located within the corporate limits of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, to Gregory A. Isbell and Jacqueline Isbell upon the terms and conditions set forth herein, ready for your consideration on first reading. This is presented before you this evening as a result of when Mr. Isbell bought that property, there was a retaining wall that had been built out into the right-of-way to allow construction of parking associated with that business. The retaining wall was in a state of disrepair and needed to be replaced. Mr. Isbell met with us and found it to be acceptable if he would incur the cost of repairing the wall, that we would donate the right-of-way that would get the wall and the parking spaces over onto his property. So that's what this ordinance accomplishes.
Very good. Any questions? Do you have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Next order of business is consideration of ordinance 4648-17, an ordinance to abandon a portion of Hamilton Place upon the terms and conditions contained herein, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, ready for your consideration on second reading after public hearing. If you will recall, this is a request to abandon a small piece of right-of-way in the vicinity of the traffic circle coming off of State of Franklin Road. This will allow the developer of the adjoining property to put in sufficient parking to accommodate a proposed new business there. We would recommend your approval after public hearing.
Very good. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is anybody here to speak for or against this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Ms. Carrier? Got anything? Any questions?
Second.
Got a motion? A second? Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4646-17. This is consideration of a resolution to annex 3244 Knob Creek Road, which is associated with ordinance 4646-17. A resolution to annex certain property located within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, adjoining the present corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee. Said property being known as the Mackey annexation, to zone said property RP2 planned residential as described herein, and to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee accordingly, being a part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, ready for your consideration on third and final reading.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Now we will consider ordinance number 4646-17. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith, and amendatory thereof by assigning a RP2 planned residential to certain property within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, known as the Mackey annexation, ready for your consideration on third and final reading.
Any questions?
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Welcome to the city.
Next order of business is consideration of a resolution to rescind the external fee schedule for GIS data and map products. Back in 1996, the City Commission adopted a resolution setting a fee schedule. Technology and data have changed tremendously in that time period, and what is proposed now is that we would provide an open data format to all of our mapping and GIS data. People could go online and capture whatever data they want and use it within legal means however they wished. And so we would propose not charging for access to that data, but to impose a fee if we got work order requests which required us to manipulate data and make maps. And Mr. Elmore is here if you have additional questions about the details of that.
Move approval.
We have a motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Would, real quick, if you'd just like to let folks know where to go to get this now for free.
Map them to the map. So the details linking to the open data portal will be posted on the city's website under the GIS division, which is accessible through the department structure. We'll highlight that on the website in order to make that navigation easy for folks.
So self-service, it's free. If not, $1 million.
$1 million.
Okay. All right.
In $75 an hour increments.
Correct. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Thank you. As an update, Commissioner Van Brocklin, Captain Powell has assured me that everything has been checked off, signed off, approved, and we're in good order up there.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you checking and appreciate it being done.
Your next order of business is consideration of approval of a one-year contract between the city and the First Tennessee Development District for the administration and implementation of a CDBG housing rehab program for a total amount of $350,000 for the program year.
Very good. Ms. Carey?
This is a follow-up from our work session with the Housing Board. This was one of the priorities, is rehab housing, reconstruction of housing, and this contract allows the First Tennessee Development District just to administer those home reconstructions and rehabs for us.
Very good. Do we have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Mayor Temita?
Yes.
Your next order of business is consider approval of the FY 17-18 contract between the City of Johnson City and ETSU Day Center for public facility improvements utilizing CDBG funds.
Carey?
ETSU requested, Day Center requested $50,000 for gap funding between of what it costs to build the Day Center versus the funding that they had acquired through grants and ETSU, and $50,000 was that gap.
Very good. Do we have any questions?
No, but I do have a couple of comments I'll make on this. We had the same discussion when this was brought up, and we said to go ahead with what was suggested, understanding that it was going to come back for further consideration. I still firmly believe that community development block grant money should be used for rehabilitations, for reconstructions, and for emergency repairs. Assuming that you were going to use this for the center, it seems to me that it should be going towards construction. It's going towards supplies and it's going towards furniture, and I have a real hard time with accepting the use of these dollars for that. Now, you've heard it from me before, you really don't have to respond to it, and I understand that you're looking at this as a one-time occurrence, but even as a one-time occurrence, I can't support it and I won't vote for it.
Ms. Carey, this is Public Facilities Improvement Program. Is that a different kind of funding source? And is it to be specifically used for these kind of projects?
Yes, ma'am. The facilities and public facilities, you can only use a percentage of 15% for the entire allotment that we get for CDBG. It's a specific amount. The reason that we had the equipment and the clinic for this is because it is a qualifier for CDBG, and those types of purchases qualify with those CDBG monies in the public facility sector of the CDBG grant. So we put that in there as purchasing that as part of the overall cost of building of the day center.
If we didn't use it for this, could we use it for home improvement? Or is this a different?
Yes, you could. It's
Line
in the
item
same pot
funding.
of money,
Okay.
but you can only use 15% of that pot of money towards public facilities and improvements.
That's the maximum amount.
That's
you
the
can use out of
maximum
that.
amount. Yes, sir.
And how much is that maximum amount total? Is it 50,000 or is it more than that?
The maximum amount that we can use for that will probably be around 60 to 75,000 is what you could use for those public facility improvements.
And correct me if I'm wrong, part of what is driving this is a risk of losing those dollars because it's taken too long to spend some of them. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, we have a timeliness test at the beginning of May every year, and you have to spend down to a time and a half of what your disbursement is from the federal government, and that is around $750,000 is what we have to spend down to. And at times, we've come at risk of having more than that, and then if you do not spend it under that amount, then you do lose it. Yes, sir.
Because I would echo Commissioner Van Brocklin's preference toward those projects. I'm going to support this, simply understanding some of where we're at in the here and now, but I just want to be clear that my preference would be for the types of projects that he alluded to.
And the Housing and Community Development Advisory Board understands that, and I think they pick some of these projects that will actually help our community, but they're one-time only purchases and not to be a reoccurring purchase, such as our rehabs and rehabilitations.
So we'd like not to hear this again, is what we're saying.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The downtown clinic, that will be a service that's available to?
The homeless.
Just to the homeless?
It's not just the homeless, it's just those in need, and it helps significantly with that population, yes.
Very good. Any other discussion? Any more questions? If not, do we have a motion? Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Jennings, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklen, Commissioner Wise,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock,
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
Your next order of business is to consider approval of increased fair market values for tracks 23, 24, 25, and 26, and 31 in the amount of $5,700. This is associated with the Knob Creek Road CSX Railroad Overpass Project. We would recommend your approval. This is only 20% of this is funded by general fund. This is an 80-20 match.
Very good. Any questions?
Now, let me ask a question. Comment in the summary is due to a TDOT policy change, any offers not made within 60 days after the issuance of the LPA Form 2 approved offer basis summary and authorization must be reevaluated. Why did this not occur within that 60-day period of time? And why are we now looking at an escalation of several $1,000s overall?
The people who are doing the offers have been well advised that this won't occur again.
We're going to take it out of their fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the law changed, I think, July 1st, so that nobody knew it at the time. And then this has taken a little while. But 60 days is unacceptable.
We agree. Thank you.
And this, just to be clear, this has been deducted from their fee?
This one has not. If it happens again, it will.
Mr. Benzola, why would we not deduct it from their fee at this point? I mean, they should be well aware of what the law is, if this is their primary business.
Well, you're right, and I can't speak for them. What I have been advised is that it did catch everybody by surprise that the law did change, and they were not aware of it.
I think it's fair
That's
that
what I've been told.
do you think, I mean, we're paying them a pretty significant sum of money for these appraisals. Do you think it's fair that we should be picking up $4,900, $5,100, $5,600, $5,700 extra because they didn't?
Well, I think it's reasonable
weren't
that
aware.
they can't make an offer within 60 days of the time that we set the fair market value. No, I don't think that's reasonable. But I don't know how to make a firm argument if the law changed in midstream. So I don't know how to address that.
I'm not an attorney, but I recall the phrase that says ignorance of the law is no excuse. What happens if we don't approve this?
Then I will go back to him and explain why, which will be the same explanation that should have been articulated to him from my perspective.
How many appraisals have they done altogether, Mr. Penzola, for this project?
I think they're right around 30 of the 36, and we're negotiating with people. We just have to make the offer. I mean, I don't know why it takes so long to just make an offer. And so I don't think it'll apply again. And it certainly will be, well, why didn't you make an offer? That's on your dime. This is ridiculous. That's what they should have been told. Now, if you want me to tell them what you're saying, which is the same thing I've said, I can do that.
Let me ask you one more question. We really don't have any option but to increase the amount that's being offered at this point. Is that
At this
correct?
point, we had no option.
Then how do we need to proceed with this, Mr. Peterson? I mean, I would, quite honestly, I think that the appraisal company should be paying the overage.
At $5,700.
On the other hand, we need to get these offers made, and apparently we have no opportunity to offer any less than with the addition. So what's the best approach to this?
Two weeks' time isn't going to make any difference one way or the other. If it's the will of the board to deny this request and instruct the staff to go back to Dunn and Metz and explain to them that this is unacceptable and that our expectation is for them to reduce their fee or for them to absorb this additional cost due to their untimeliness in processing our work, then we'll relay that message and see if what we can negotiate with them. And if we're successful, then we would have a contract amendment, I would assume, some sort of agreement that they would pay, and if they're unagreeable, then we could come back to you in 2 weeks and say, this is the response we got, and we could address this again at that point.
It would be with Vaughn and Melton, who's the one doing the.
I'm sorry, Vaughn and Melton, okay.
Have all the properties now been appraised? Or are there still some to
There's
go?
still some out there.
How many? Do you know?
I'm going to say around 6.
Around 6 more?
And there's no fire. This is a project that is not funded. We're only doing the acquisition, so I would be very comfortable with sending it back for 2 weeks, and I get kind of annoyed looking at this stuff anyway, so don't want to overpay it.
Well, and without regard for the law change, 60 days, somebody sat on this an awful long time. I forget what the ramifications for waiting 61 days were. I mean, what's involved from the point the LPA Form 2 is issued? It would seem
They're
like
not doing their job.
it would be to communicate to the property owner, we'd like to offer X.
That triggers it, and apparently it wasn't done within 60 days. And that's what we're saying, that's unacceptable. But
We
we
seem to
didn't
all
know the
agree.
law was in existence at the time, so whether or not they knew it, I do not know. Do I make the assumption because they're the relocation specialists and the right-of-way specialists, they should know these things? Doesn't mean I should know it, but they certainly should.
They're supposed to do. That is their business.
Their
isn't it?
job.
Yeah.
Well, I would make a motion that we defer, consider approval of increased fair market values for tracks the 23, 24, 25, 26, and 31, in the amount of $5,700 on the Knob Creek Road CSX Railroad Overpass project, and ask staff to have a discussion with the appraisers regarding our expectation that they handle the overage that was caused by not doing things in a timely fashion.
Second that motion.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? And Mr. Jennings, would call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin, Commissioner Wise,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock,
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
I do have one other question. Mr. Pinzola, we have a contract with this company?
Yes, you do.
Okay, and are there specifications that laid out in terms of?
I don't know the answer as to whether or not within that contract we had a certain time limit. I doubt it within the contract. But we'll research that as well.
Thank you.
We're net 60. All right. Very good. Mr. Peterson.
Your next order of business on your agenda is consideration of the Johnson City Street Mural Program. Is this the one that you're?
These are the two that I'd
That
asked.
you want to have this
defer.
one and the next one, which is consideration of the Tree Streets Neighborhood Mural Project deferred.
Correct.
You do have 4 people here from the neighborhood. You do have some people here from the neighborhood if you want to do it.
Okay.
They have been advised that you may be considering deferral of both the program as a whole and their particular request.
Well, I guess the communication I got from the neighbors, and I'm sorry I didn't talk to anybody that I see here in the audience, would like to see this as well as it is here, not necessarily tied together, that the Tree Streets project be a Tree Streets project, and if we as a city decide to take it as a citywide project, that should be, a very separate consideration, and not hang that responsibility on the Tree Streets to set the guidelines for the city as a whole. So if you're here, you've waited through the whole meeting, and I'm sorry we would have moved you moved a little quicker. I would like to defer the Johnson City Street Mural Program and then hear the Tree Streets neighborhood since they are here. if that's acceptable to my colleagues.
Well, I guess the only question to that, Mayor, would be whether or not without guidelines in place, whether or not what they're proposing will match what ultimately the guidelines will be and whether we do want to do it in that order.
The thought is that this is sort of this is uncharted territory, and that perhaps it would be wise to let the Tree Streets do their project, and then we see how that works. Much like we've done many things that have been, successful in this town. Founders Park being one of them. We phased it. We didn't do it all at once. We phased it, made sure that each step we took that we were doing the right thing. This is something that may not work for every street. And I think it began as just a one neighborhood that wanted to do this. I don't think my neighborhood's going to want to do it. I don't think a lot of neighborhoods will be interested in doing it.
Your neighbor would love it.
Mr. Benzola,
I don't want to speak for my neighbor. He might want to.
Let me ask you a question. Personally, I'm not really supportive of street murals, okay? That's starting point really doesn't have anything to do with the question that I'm going to ask, though. As I look at the guidelines that were established, the suggested guidelines, generally speaking, if you're going to do them, I think that it answers a lot of the questions. So for this specific street mural, is it intended that it be constructed to follow these guidelines, which we're apparently not going to consider right now? Would it at least meet that standard?
That was the struggle we had, so we thought, should we have a program in place that talks about materials and location and things like that? And then whatever you approve would follow that program. The intention all along has been you always have the final say, that you don't have to approve anything. And so what I decided was that let's just consider the program as a whole. You don't have to approve it. Their particular project has gone through all of what's in that program, so they're good to go if you kind of like the program.
Okay, if I looked at, in particular, you definitely have to have paints that are going to hold up and are going to look good
Correct.
for a period of time with a lot of traffic going over them. Is this particular project designed with those types of paints intended?
They have had an issue with the paint, but the way we're saying it is that we would have final approval over the materials used. And so we would defer to experts, we paint
Okay,
all
who
the
will make that
streets.
decision, Public Art or Public Works, or? Because, right now, we're being asked to approve something being done, so that tells me, or it says to me, that more than likely the commission won't see this again. I'm not sure I want to be the one deciding what paints need to be used or anything like that
It's
anyway.
intended for our traffic division that handles paints and streets, who are the experts much further along than us to make final judgment on the type of paint. That's the intention. And that's the way it should be written. What they have done is they have followed a process at a suggestion. And we asked for a high number of people to approve. We asked for consideration. One time it was in the Tree Streets, so we asked them to go to the Historic Planning Commission or that body. They did. It turns out that this one is actually outside of that district. We asked them to come before the Public Art Committee, who makes a recommendation to this board as to the suitability of what's being proposed. They approved it unanimously. So then it became, okay, what do we do now? And I thought that having a program in place would be good, but you don't have to. You can defer on the program. They've complied with every element of that program. You can defer on that and go straight to, do you want this do you want this design at the intersection of Pine and Spring Street? And you have the design in front of you. Everybody on the Public Art Committee likes it. They like the design, so I just forward that to you. And so there was an individual who did a lot of the legwork for the group that I believe probably talked to the mayor. She had asked that it not be, and I said, well, let's just get moving and get this, get you freed up and let's move on.
Okay.
If you want to
Well-
defer, that's fine too.
Question number one was whether or not this particular mural met the standards that were in this proposed guidelines, which I take it, I understand that it does. Okay. The other comment, I think going forward, we almost have to have a document that lays out a process, because otherwise, it's going to come down to the commission making a decision on content, which we've been told that legally we cannot do. And I think the only way probably to approach that is through the Public Art Committee. So before additional requests are made and are in front of us, I do think, Mayor, we really do need to have that.
And that was kind of my point. I don't want to hold up their project, the Tree Streets project is separate from a citywide. I'm personally not ready to turn street murals loose on the entire city of Johnson City. I'd kind of like to see how it works.
Okay.
And I think through that, we form that process, because if we don't like this, we never have to do another one again. But if we do, we set up, so, but I think we're getting the cart before the horse a little bit. I understand we need guidelines, but I think those guidelines, I'm comfortable with the guidelines that are in that singular project. I'd just as soon let that one be the only one for a while until we see how it
Well,
works.
I think
And
we
then-
have
And
an
then
op-
have the larger.
We have an
larger guideline.
opportunity here. Let's don't lose sight that the street murals are really for traffic calming, whereas we could go in and spend thousands of dollars for how many roundabouts are being requested and speed bumps and things that are obnoxious to slow people down. And so I think our opportunity is to study this and to see if it really works that way. We're not the first city to look at this. There's a lot of experience out there that we should continue to benchmark. And then, are y'all planning to do any kind of studies and follow up and see what the reaction is and study the traffic in this area to see how effective they
That's
are?
an element of it. There is a beautification aspect to it. There is the togetherness of a neighborhood and bringing a neighborhood together. There is that aspect to it, in addition to the traffic calming. It's not necessarily a traffic calming, even though we believe
That's
it acts like that according to all the other cities that have been contacted. It has been done in cities across the country. It's kind of a nice program, and this would be a nice pilot project if that's what you would like.
But exactly, I mean, I think you said, I think we let this be the pilot project, and we learn from this, by which we set those guidelines citywide. But I don't want to hold, if everything looks good on their project, I don't want to hold them up because I wouldn't be comfortable making a citywide decision right now.
I really like their project, and their design is really a nice design. There's no question about that.
Very good. Any other questions, comments?
Vote on,
The approval from 70% of the neighbors or residents in the impacted area, what does that mean about the other 30%? Does it mean they just got to 70% and the other 30% just couldn't be?
They haven't I don't think they had a no on that.
I can answer that question.
Sure.
Good evening, Nathan Brand. To answer your question, all neighbors were contacted, and those that were unresponsive were contacted through the mail. So 3 attempts, I believe, were made at the residence, and then letters were sent to the owner's tax address, not necessarily to the address.
So the 70% means 70% finally responded in the affirmative, and the other 30%, you just haven't gotten anything.
That is correct, yeah.
That is the same threshold we use for traffic calming. When they go through a plan, develop a plan, then you have to get 70%. I don't think you had any negatives.
That is correct. We did have no negatives. We just had unresponsiveness.
Thank you.
what is the cost of doing the mural that's been presented here?
They'll be painting, probably around 1,000,
Okay. And who will be actually installing this?
the residents.
Okay, so we've got some artists in the group who can stay kind of in between the lines a little bit.
That's right, but it's also, one of the reasons that the design that you see is so simple is so that it can be painted on by all of the neighbors,
Right.
and that it can be easily maintained over the years. So that helps with community involvement, which I think you mentioned.
I like it. I mean, I really do. I think it's unique, and I think it serves many purposes, and look forward to, not, to driving on it. If for whatever reason it needed to be removed, would you
There's a,
power wash it off, or
the
how would that
way
happen?
the program was designed was 3 years maximum. Then you have to reapply again. And then at the end of each year, you have to maintain the standards that we establish. And if you don't, we can eliminate it at any time if it's not maintained to the standards of a fresh mural.
Bill, let me make one more comment if I could. When you do get to a more generalized policy regarding these, I think we need to put in there some indication of a time period that streets can be closed for, and you can't have them closed any longer than a certain period of time. You don't have that in this document. Okay.
Very good. And I certainly did not mean to speak for my neighborhood.
How about a cul-de-sac? I'd love to have a big round.
Just be surprised.
So are we voting on this tonight?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I move for approval of the request from the Tree Street neighborhood for the street mural project.
Good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Just as a point of clarification, so we're on item F, which is the Tree Street specific mural. We've skipped over item E, or did we take a move to defer that, or are we just gonna skip it?
I just ignored it. We can remove it if you want.
Well, no,
Probably
I
just
just,
need to defer it.
for
I
the
would
purposes
prefer
of
to
the
defer
record, I
it.
thought we
Correct.
need to take some action, but there's a motion and a second on item F. We'll just go back to E.
That's right.
Take it in reverse alphabetical order.
Is that okay, Ms. Jennings? All right. Very good. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklen,
I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm not sure that this enhances the beauty of the area or our community.
Commissioner Wise,
I'm going to respect the input of the neighbors and vote yes, but also with a sense that I can imagine several neighborhoods I'm personally familiar with that would have absolutely no interest in this, to each their own.
Vice Mayor Brock,
A very big yes.
and Mayor Temita.
Yes. Very good. Do we have a motion to defer?
I would make a
Item E.
motion to defer item E.
Item E.
Could I add to defer to a workshop setting first? How about that?
I would make that modification to my motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Jennings, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklen.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock,
Yes.
Mayor Temita.
Yes.
Following up on Commissioner Brock's suggestion for a workshop, any particular time? Phil, would you be ready for a workshop next week? Workshop,
Does it really make sense to have the workshop now as opposed to seeing what the impact of the
let's
actual
wait.
project
Wait till after
is?
they get this thing done and we
Installed.
look at it and see what everybody thinks, and then we'll
that's,
come back.
that's what I wanted to clarify. Is to-
Yeah, I
Do that
think
next week.
we'll have a much better sense of total sentiment once it's finished, because there's a certain segment of the population that doesn't take anything serious until they're actually looking at it. And then we'll know.
Yep.
We'll go for a walkthrough, a roundabout.
A drive-through.
Well, save us a pedal.
A drive-through.
Save us something really easy to paint.
And then we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll paint a pedal. Good luck. Good luck.
Hope it goes well.
Yep.
This time, we would like to make a presentation to you on the Cobb Creek Stormwater Study Analysis. As you're aware, this is an analysis that's been ongoing for some time, and it is our efforts to better understand Cobb Creek what flooding does take there and what potential cures may be in place to address some of that flooding along Cobb Creek. So,
The firm is here to make a presentation. I'm just trying to gear this baby up.
Phil, before we start on the presentation, would you just kind of give the commission a little bit of an overview from your standpoint and having had to deal with problems along there over many years, why this is important?
Commissioner, back in the early 80s, and for you that have been here, there was a lake along Lakeview. And that lake did a lot of good. During the time of the mall construction, detention wasn't required. And so the combination of that with the loss of the lake in order for developers to build did result in additional flow along Cobb Creek. So we have gone through multiple studies. We've looked at every drainage facility in that entire basin. And what we saw was there were locations between Oakland Avenue and downstream that had very rapid waters in an event that probably was 3 inches, a 3-inch event in 6 hours. To the point where, frankly, I was scared for those residents. The county came in the mid-'80s when George James kind of first arrived, and he actually increased the pipe sizes for various driveways to give relief. It used to be a kind of a single box or a single pipe, and he added one in most instances. And so all of those combinations, at no fault to the people who built the homes way back when, they're starting to experience flooding. Now, when you build today, all the way up to a few years ago, you could build in a floodplain, and it could flood the building, but you had to have the first floor elevation 1 foot above the 100-year. Well, we've been through that with a lot of residents. And then it got to a point where this is abusive. So we actually changed that regulation. And today, if you're building, your footer elevation, top of footer has to be 1 foot above the 100-year, so that the people who are buying homes who just assume that the homes are fine, that they're not threatened by floodwaters. So when so in the 3 homes, there were 3 homes near Oakland Avenue that we're really concerned with. And so we bought those. And we bought them not only because it is our valued opinion we have to upgrade the culvert of Oakland Avenue, because Oakland Avenue, which is a main artery, is getting flooded every time you get a 3-inch or above rain event. Every time you get an event like that, there are 3 places in town that flood, 3 roads that get cut off. But Austin Springs seems to be the worst of it. And so there are 2 culverts further down on Austin Springs. They get overwhelmed. So you can't go down Austin Springs. We're having to close the road essentially every time. So we prioritized it, and we said, okay, what could be done? Which is what we asked them to look at. And the results weren't too good. There wasn't much that can be done. And that's what he's going to talk to you about. Then we asked him to go back and look at, there was some commercial property I was aware of.
I feel like you just stole his thunder.
And the roadway itself, what could be done, and wanted to look at whether or not that would have an impact on reducing flooding. And that's why we picked this one. We picked it when we set up the utility fee in the first place. we said that we would enhance maintenance. We would then address downtown, which we're doing. And Cobb Creek was the next one on the list. And then likely Sinking Creek. So there was a game plan in place when we set the fee in 2000, I think it was 2007. So this is the report of can anything be done?
Okay.
Where does Cobb Creek run to the west? Where does it continue?
It starts up, that drainage basin starts up in North Hills subdivision and runs all the way to the river.
So it's behind Hunter's Lake and behind, between Sunset and...
Yeah, up from Sunset near Knob Creek. It runs through North Hills.
And some of those houses on I can't think of the street now, the basements all
Regency.
flood. Yeah,
Regency,
Regency, the
yes.
basements all flood, don't they? Well, they're low.
Those are more associated with sinkholes.
Okay.
And so that water really doesn't escape until we pump. For example, the one on Regency, the sinkhole, and after a rain event, we pump it. Well, we pump
Put it
it
in
into
this
this
basin.
basin. There are certain areas, a lot of town acres and stuff, and we did that study. And so that's where it starts and then runs through that valley, down Austin Springs, past the treatment plant.
So the
and
acres of
discharges.
pavement at the mall are a major factor.
That was a factor in the increase. You're reducing the pervious surface.
Is there anything left for you to report, or is it?
Oh, well, don't worry, we're going to tell the story sort of Tarantino style, so we'll give you a little up front and then back you up. So thank you, Phil, for the background information. My name is Patrick McMahon. I work for S&ME, and we're here in Johnson City, and we're in Knoxville. I am Knoxville stock. Well, I've been visiting Johnson City for about the last 20 years, and I cannot believe how much the city has changed in 20 years. It's really
Come join us, we'd love to have
amazing
you as a
things that
resident
happen.
here.
It'd be a lovely place to live.
It is, it is.
So, thank you very much for having me, first off. It's an exciting moment for someone who works in hydrology to be asked to make a presentation to decision makers, because reports like this often just get set on a shelf and they collect dust, and 10 years later someone pulls it out and says, well, that's not going to be good anymore. This doesn't even apply. So, thank you for having me. I'd like to recognize Phil and Andy and thank them for their participation in the whole process, because it has been Tarantino style. We've had to move around quite a bit, because I think where we started is certainly not where we ended up, but the numbers sort of led us down this path. So what I want to review with you real quick is what our initial scope of work was, where we thought the ship was heading. We got about midway through that scope and decided it was probably not wise to keep our heads down and just plow to the end. We thought we need to change direction here in order to make some meaningful recommendations. So we kind of circled the wagons, changed directions a little bit. We'll talk about what the results of that revised scope were, and then talk about some of the alternatives that came out of that. And I apologize for stepping away from the mic. I suppose I need to stay on the mic here. Okay, rollerball. So initially, we were asked to, the scope was developed in 3 tasks. First, to review and evaluate existing data, which there's a wealth of existing data here. We have, well, I'll review those for you in the next slide. Second was to do the hydrologic modeling. So, what's actually going on, what can we evaluate in terms of how much water, how often, how fast, and then what can we do to alleviate particularly flooding in the northern part of the watershed, and let's come up with a handful of engineered solutions for addressing the high water during floods downstream in Cobb Creek. The data sources we had to start with, like I said, there were really a lot of information to start with. We had, the city had already done an extensive sub-basin delineation, so we already had a map of the watershed and all the sub-basins. This old figure here is from the 1992 study, which roughly approximates the current watershed. It's difficult to see in this format. I'm sorry, yes, 1992. We had the 1998 sinkhole study, If you look at a coarse grain topographic map, the watershed for Cobb Creek is quite a bit larger than what its effective watershed is. Once you cut out the sinkhole watersheds, that accounts for quite a bit of it. We also had a wealth of GIS data, so LiDAR data, data that was collected on surveys of the infrastructure and cross-sections of the streams, upstream and downstream of that infrastructure. We have NRCS land cover data. We have HEC2, which is the effective FEMA model for the 100-year event on that stream, and also the flood insurance study. So we developed some hydrologic parameters for each of the subwatersheds, some of them very straightforward, such as just how big is it? Second, what is the average land slope? So it's the average slope of a discretized view of the watershed, so not necessarily the slope of the steepest path. What is the percent impervious? We can get that from USGS land cover databases. We develop a weighted curve number, which is the SCS method for helping determine your infiltration and runoff. We used both the SCS method and some various other engineering methods for estimating the amount of rates of infiltration in the watershed. We used SWIM, the EPA's stormwater management model software, to put together our hydrologic model. We estimated the time concentration using SCS methods known as the lag time, and for subrouting between watersheds is probably a lot more information than you guys need. We use just general
You're
general
already
open channel
past
running.
where.
No, say more.
We engineers get really excited about this kind of
performance,
thing.
yeah.
There's going to be lasers and fireworks. I hope you guys stay tuned.
Yeah. I have no idea what you just said, right?
Been waiting on this
Oh,
one.
there we go. There's pictures.
Yeah, there's graphs, pretty graphs. We'll get to results. I'll zip through the technical stuff quickly. It's not a gauged stream, so we don't have the ability to just go out and do a statistical analysis on gauge data and say, what's the 100-year flood? We have several tools at our disposal. I'll go ahead and skip a couple slides here. We have several tools at our disposal for estimating what our 100-year flows are. One, we can go back to the FEMA study. And in this graph, this is on the bottom here, river stationing in feet. So 0 is down at the confluence where it goes to the river, and then as you climb up towards the mall, so your flows are increasing going downstream.
Let me ask you a real quick question with regard to the FEMA study that was done in '92. The amount of impervious surface has changed, a lot more development. How useful is that information to you at this point?
Very useful. Or how useful is the FEMA data?
Right.
Oh, well, the models themselves still contain.
Because I think in your report, you'd indicated that was one of the things that you looked at real critically as you were arriving at your final recommendations. So it's not real accurate at this point. Do you have an adjustment that you do for that, or how do you utilize that in a useful manner?
Sure. I'll answer it in two parts.
I wonder whether or not it skews your recommendation and how comfortable you are if you don't have the appropriate data going in, that your conclusion is really what it needs to be.
Well, first off, I apologize if the report was unclear. We do reference the FEMA data, but our model, at the end of the day, the only information we have used for our mapping of the 100-year floodwater outline is some of the bridge data from that old FEMA model. That was just so we didn't have to pay for survey. Now, everything else has been updated, and we did do a comparison at the end for the boundaries, and I'll get into a little bit more about why those are different and why they're not as different as maybe you would imagine they would be, given that this first line is a relatively low flow. That's the existing FEMA model. So like you said, outdated, doesn't account for a lot of additional impervious surfaces. Our next dashed line there is a USGS regression analysis, commonly referred to as stream stats. And that does not account for urbanization. It's a very generalized tool for the area. I'm going to skip over that green line. That was a different modeling technique we used as sort of a benchmark for how the others were working. And then the last one we have here is the steep dashed line is the current regression equations that are used for design in the city. And so there's good news here. Our modeling results line up fairly well with that regression line. So that was one of Phil's early concerns was, are we under-designing our current pipes? And it looks like if you're using your current regression analysis, you're fine. And those were developed by TVA They did account for urbanization, so not a big surprise that those two would line up. So, great, we know what kind of flows we're getting, and I did skip by how we got these 100-year flows. We took the entire period of record data, so from 1943 to about 2013, hourly rainfall records, ran them through a model that estimates the runoff from each one of those rainfall events. And then we do a statistical analysis of that data to get a distribution for recurrence intervals. So how often are we going to see certain flows, like a 100-year flow? So that's how we got that data without having a USGS gauge. So with that, we compare to existing.
So to be clear, the
FEMA.
100-year flow wouldn't happen every 100 years.
I'm so glad you asked. This is such a timely question. Yeah, you could have a 100-year flow 5 times in 1 year. You could go 50 years and never see a 5-year flood. It's really, the hydrologist community has done a bad job with that language. It's really a percentage of probability. So a 5-year event has a 20% probability of happening in any given year. So
Need to be on the commission in 2011-12. We heard a lot of this when we were talking about Brush Creek.
So the bottom line is you really don't know, right?
That's why you'd be a hydrologist. You're like, I don't know.
So we check all this data, we compile it, we analyze it, and then we guess.
You know, it beats guessing. That's the good thing you can say for it is it beats guessing.
But the definition of a 100-year flood is so many inches within a 24-hour period of time. Is that?
Well, that is you make a good distinction. There's a 100-year precipitation event, and there's a 100-year flow. On a small watershed that's fairly simple, like say a gas station, the 100-year flow runoff from that gas station is very closely approximated, if not exactly the same as the runoff from a 100-year precipitation event. On a complex watershed scale, the two are not always the same. And so that's why we modeled the actual runoff, which accounts for drying between rainfall events and infiltration, and then looked at the runoff we're getting and ran our analysis on that. Did I make the distinction clear?
You did. I'm just wondering, did you account for the actual rain that hit the creek without having to run off from anything?
You know, I will concede that we did not account for the ribbon of creek running through the middle. I hope we accounted for that on some safety factor on the end.
We're trying to trip you up here.
And I do
appreciate
we're paying attention. So I apologize, these figures, large maps are difficult on PowerPoint slides, so you may have to use your imagination a little bit. Do I have a pointer? Great, I do. So at first, we were really hoping we'd see opportunities for regional detention, similar to the 1992 study, and we could find a few silver bullets and say, okay, we can put a couple ponds here or underground retention facilities and make a big dent fast, and then maybe add some other elements. We looked at that in a very coarse fashion. I may skip one ahead here. For instance, we said, let's just say, pull that whole watershed at the south end, the mall, that big impervious watershed, just pull that out of the model. Let's see what our flows look like. So that would be the sort of impossibly good scenario that you could retain all that water indefinitely. So the flows at East Oakland Avenue for a 1-year event, you see a very significant change. You go from 156 to 56 CFS. So you've cut it by 2/3. But the flows don't tell the full story. The recurrence interval only jumps, kind of one tier. So you go from flooding every 1 year to every 2 years, which doesn't seem like a very good use of resources. It would be very expensive to build these large retention facilities. So right out of the gate, we said, we got to knock that off the table. That's probably not something that's going to give us a meaningful benefit. So we also looked at the likelihood of using low-impact development, which is the development theory that you treat every site, you try to keep it sort of like it was hydraulically before you developed it. You infiltrate as much water as you can that lands on impervious surfaces. You try to limit the amount of water running off. We ran a similar analysis in SWIM and ran it enough to make us comfortable that it would take a really, really concerted effort by private landowners, really accepting this philosophy of changing the hydrology on their sites to make a meaningful difference. So while changes in policy that are currently in place and going to be coming, additional policies will make strides, it's not a near-term solution. So, again, let's kick the can a little further down. What can we do near-term? And I believe we've pretty well gotten that one. So this is when we hit the midpoint, sat down with Phil and Andy and said, let's reevaluate. It's not going to be a traditional engineering solution on the upside of the watershed. And we talked about what could we possibly do. We want to keep East Oakland Avenue out of the water. That's number one. So obviously the first one is pick it up, raise the road, put in a larger culvert. Let's see, what would that take? Can it be done? Excuse me. The second is to assess removing bridges downstream. There are several bridges downstream of East Oakland Avenue, and the thought was if there's a hydraulic effect of those bridges and they're impounding water upstream, would eliminating some of those or even making them large enough that they didn't effectively exist from a hydrologic standpoint, would that make a big difference? Third, there's some commercial property downstream of East Oakland Avenue, and thinking a little outside of the box, we thought, well, can we do an auxiliary bypass channel to add capacity at that point and maybe alleviate some of the flooding that's going on upstream? So we can't attack it from the top. Let's try to attack it locally or even downstream. Lastly, what if we pile all these together? Just pie in the sky. Do we see a meaningful benefit? And if not, that'll tell us something. Lastly, getting in the position that we saw ourselves heading, Phil had asked that we develop some maps that show what are the predicted areas of inundation, knowing that the FEMA mapping is outdated. Let's take a look at that stuff so maybe we can help make some decisions moving down the road. And I'll pick up the pace. I'm sure you guys are ready to get to the end. So our alternative A, raise the road. The existing culvert is a 4-foot by 9-foot box culvert. It floods almost every year. What it would take to keep that road out of the water is a 7.5-foot by 30-foot arch culvert. We looked at an open bottom arch culvert and picked a concept design that we thought would be the most cost efficient from both a materials and construction standpoint. But that's a starting point. It's just a concept. We did some preliminary grading to try to assign some costs for what it would take to actually raise the road in that area, to keep the road out, as well as get all the water through. Hydraulically in the concept design, we don't see any, there's no worsening of the flood condition locally, so we do believe that a FEMA no-rise could be achieved during final design, so we'd get past that hurdle. And the road elevation would need to be 1,542, and I don't believe the existing elevation is XXX. It's something more like 1,538 or so. It's about a 3-foot raise there at the peak of the road. Bridge removal, we didn't see any significant reduction in flooding in the area for removing these bridges. They're up sufficiently small size that they're so inundated during the 100-year event. I mean, they really don't play a significant role. So just a graphic. These are exaggerated scales, but these are the 2 bridges down. The double crossing there at East Oakland Avenue, or I'm sorry, South Austin Springs Road. The line here is if you take the bridges out, this is with the bridges in. There's a minimal improvement right where these bridges are, but it peters out pretty quick moving upstream. The idea of converting the commercial property into an auxiliary bypass, that might look something like this. We tried to pick an alignment and some geometries that would be constructible and hopefully meaningful from a hydrologic standpoint, but the hydraulic controls are really outside of those bounds. That's really a low spot in the watershed anyway. It currently floods quite frequently. And so we found that even though you're getting additional storage in that auxiliary channel, it's not making a meaningful impact upstream or downstream to your flooding. So again, not much return for your investment.
Is that channel culvert?
That's open channel.
Open channel?
Yes, ma'am.
So they'll allow us to reroute the creek or?
From a permitting standpoint and even a land ownership standpoint, we were hands off. So this is definitely is this even possible kind of analysis? And, it's probably not worth running down further. was our conclusion.
So not only are you guessing, you don't know if we can do it at all, right?
I know, don't you want this job?
I love it, yeah.
So I don't want to beat the point to the ground on the auxiliary channel. These are some results. You can go to the report and dig up results. But again, just the changes in water surface elevation are out there in the noise. So not a big difference. So looking at inundation limits, before we get to our final results here, we used HECRA's two-dimensional model to develop these inundation limits. We did some post-processing in GIS. The 100-year limit is different than what's in the current FIS. This is due to difference in flows. Of course, we have a lot more water. Difference in topographic inputs. The old FEMA models were based on 20-foot contours, so they're pretty coarse. The new LiDAR data shows a lot more relief, so we actually have quite a bit more storage in the system. So these first two kind of act like a balance. They don't quite balance each other out, but they bring the results a little closer together. Lastly, difference in modeling softwares that were used. Our results, I don't want to ring any alarm bells, show footprints of structures, at least 69 structures within the 100-year flood. Again, I don't want to ring alarm bells. This is just what it appears to be on LiDAR. These structures may be elevated sufficiently high, and in fact, we coordinated with Phil and Andy to look at a lot of these, and there is only one home in the city that's known to be, definitely, it shows up on our study. The city knows it floods. The other one, there are several that it may be getting into the basement, and there are some that they're commercial properties. We've kind of just removed them from the fray, but I'll skip to a slide here and show you the difference. So the green buildings here in these figures, these are buildings that have been assessed for flooding. So this hatched boundary is the FEMA result, and the dark, or the blue here, this blue is our model. So here we're outside the FEMA map, and here FEMA is kind of going out into space on some different topography. The red outline it's a footprint within the modeled flood limit, so this is one that showed up in that list of 60 some odd structures. And if it's green, that means the city's already looked at it. They said, yeah, the basement floods, but it's not a house that's in imminent danger. The one that is near our double crossing there on South Austin Springs Road on the left-hand side going north, right by the creek. It's an older home, so it shows up in our study is certainly in the 100-year floodplain, and that's been confirmed.
3 houses that we've already bought, are they reflected as the first 3 red
Yes.
rectangles right there?
Yep, that's
So
them
we've
right
already
there.
taken care of those 3, don't have to worry about those.
Yes.
Is the one. We've
Nailed
got,
it.
okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. And again, we have multiple maps in the report, and they're difficult to put in a PowerPoint, so thank you for suffering through the figures. So a summary of findings. So basically, the existing development makes it so that regional detention is not likely a good solution in the watershed. We did look at one additional lot that looked like it was kind of in the middle of the watershed. Maybe it could work, but it was elevated in such a way that either constructing it was going to be financially untenable, or you'd have to put a pump on it. It fell out of consideration pretty fast. The bridges, by and large, along Cobb Creek are so small in comparison to the 100-year event, they're just inundated. So they're not major hydraulic controls. At this stage, to get them out of the water is the bigger concern. In a lot of instances, that's going to mean raising it, such as at East Oakland Avenue, where raising it is the only feasible solution that I see for keeping it out of the flood. Again, with the 62 structures, don't worry, they're just shown in their footprints are in there, but instances of structural flooding may be significantly less because first floor elevations may be high enough. This 245 South Austin Springs Road is the one building that has been identified, confirmed with the city. There may be others as Andy continues to sort of look at these and say, is that one really an issue or not? So there's not a great solution for a lot of those homes if they end up on that list. So purchasing those properties is probably the most cost-efficient way to buy down risk in the city. I'm not an accountant. That's my opinion. Additional consideration. So this is not included in the report, but it was just something that came up in meetings between us and Phil and Andy. The flooding on South Austin Springs Road, on East Oakland Avenue, we can raise the road. That's an option. Down here, it's a lot more difficult to raise the road because the floodplain is so broad. This is private property, but if you were to relocate South Austin Springs Road right here, and you could run Princeton Road, through on a shallow bridge. It's not a main thoroughfare, so it's just a neighborhood street, and connect, moving north. That may be a reasonable way to get, emergency traffic through on South Austin Springs and not have to worry about upsizing bridges or elevating that road substantially, because that would be a major project. Again, that's not in the study, but I'm sure Phil will be happy to talk to you more about it, and I'm open to discussion as well. Again, thanks to Phil and Andy and Alan, and thank you for sitting through that. That was a lot of information. And at this time, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Quick one. What's the length of Oakland that would have to be raised?
It's a fine question. I hope there's a scale on that drawing, because
About that much.
it's not terrible. In fact, when I went to our civil engineers that do road construction, it was less than what I thought it would be. So let's say this road here is about 20 feet wide, so it's about 150 feet of road. Fortunately, we were trying to make sure we didn't have to regrade an entire intersection. It looks like it can be done without regrading the full intersection, which gets into a whole other ball of wax.
So it looks like we have an option for Oakland Avenue that's workable, but it also appears that we're really not going to make any positive impact for anything along Austin Springs. Is that the right conclusion?
It is. It's two-pronged. One is living in a new reality of development. That it's pretty well saturated development at this point, so unless zoning regulations change significantly, I think the watershed's built out about as much as it will. That's one of the issues. The other is historical and topographic. Cobb Creek has likely been a flooding issue, since the very beginning of development in Johnson City, based purely on the way the watershed's shaped. It's backwards. Usually in a typical watershed in East Tennessee, you've got steep mountains at the headlands or steep hills. So you've got fast water running off and collecting, but there's not a ton of it because you're at the top of the watershed. And then by the time you get to the bottom, everything else that's coming in on the sides is slow and moving its way in. And that's sort of typical of the area. But in Cobb Creek, your upland, the very top of your watershed is just a big dish. And as you move further down, you get into this valley where there's steep mountains on either side. And they're getting flash flooding right there during the event while they're getting the brunt of flows coming down from the top. So it's a unique watershed. I think solutions that might work elsewhere, fell off the table here because of that particular way that the land falls.
Thank you.
Are there limitations from EPA on what we could do to the creek itself? I mean, is it, obviously it's not draining fast enough to get to Boone Lake to get the water from overflowing, but nothing can be done to the creek itself?
Well, you could, and let me preface this with a big asterisk. There are other places in the country that have fought the battle of changing the creeks. They do it a lot in Alabama, in the mountainous parts of Alabama, if you can believe there are any. They try to dredge and widen streams, and that gets you on a bit of a treadmill because of the sediment transport dynamics in a watershed. And so if you widen it, you reduce the ability of that river to move all the hard material that's fed to it. And when that happens, that material deposits in the stream, and it will shrink itself back. And so you end up in a dredging every so often scenario. From a permitting standpoint, you would need, it'd be a lot of ARAP permits. The FEMA permitting on that scale would be significant, but pale in comparison to the Army Corps permitting process, I think.
There are two things that you could look at. We focused on trying to eliminate flooding, and we can't do it. But can you reduce the frequency of flood events? And that's possible, similar to what we're doing downtown. We haven't eliminated flooding, but we certainly have made a dent into the frequency of the flood events. So in part, we could have an impact on the smaller storm events by doing certain things. But at the end of the day, the only way, what the report concludes is, best way for the city to act is you have a program that would buy residential structures of a certain age and just take them out versus trying to spend millions of dollars trying to recreate or create a whole different avenue of water conveyance. So
Could that ultimately be used as retention?
The area.
We start taking out large blocks of residential?
Well, what we did look at was in the middle of Austin Springs, the property owner who is aging is offered a really good deal on the property, and that's all the commercial stuff. The reason I've always been hesitant is without justification of purchasing the property or recommending the purchase is because we said on the front end, we're going to restrict our program to residential homes that were built in the 20s and 30s and 40s and no fault of their own. We can still do that on some of the commercial properties.
But we have the authority to change that.
You do.
Yeah,
And so we have not come back to you with that. We wanted to get the report to see if in fact converting it to a holding area, a green space, something.
Can we do something similar to Founder's Park out there? It's just,
I would be happy to speak to that.
yeah.
Yes and no. Founder's Park is beautiful, by the way.
You have to pick one. It can't be both. It has to be yes or no. It can't be both.
The answer's always, it depends. So,
Well, how do we tell me, then give me the yes answer. How would we do that?
Well, I suppose it would need to make financial sense. At Founder's Park, what came with it is a very viable and vibrant commercial district that surrounds it. So developing that into something that, is an attractant to people is meaningful. Whereas here, we've got a few homes that are flooding. We can eliminate those, manage the floodplain. You could certainly make an impact with a Founder's Park type project. Whether you would see the type of return that you're going to see as a city for that kind of project is out of my wheelhouse, but I think, it would not be as significant a return.
If it's a high-frequency flood area, that's one thing, and you could adjust the regulations to accommodate that, whether it's commercial or residential, and not necessarily be strict in the 100-year. So you have ways of designing programs that would address those sort of things. Or you go to a separate type of initiative, and that is to clean up hot spots in town, which that particular property could very well be a hot spot.
So what's the estimate to raise that portion of Oakland Avenue? Because that's a quick fix for reducing
$500,000,
flood.
you should do that regardless.
Yeah. So you're going to come back, or is that in our capital plan here at
We
some point in
have,
time?
it is, but we did not put it in this year simply because we wanted to get through these downtown projects.
So that would free up the Oakland-Austin Springs intersection. That would not get flooded unless we have the 500-year flow. Okay. Yeah.
That would seem like the more reasonable short-term solution.
And then, do we still have a strategy that we may buy up some of the other properties?
Yeah, but we've gone back and looked at properties. We have to do a little bit more analysis of the homes and then look at the type of programs that could be initiated. I do know that the commercial property we've talked about here, it got flooded, but nobody else gets flooded. It's the most sensitive in the
Those auto
area.
places are over there, yeah.
So is there a will to simply eliminate those types of high-frequency flood areas? we'll have to get back to you on that.
We do have some options, so appreciate a lot. You're thorough.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
If Phil will have me, I'm happy to look more into more stormwater projects. It's been interesting opportunities.
Okay.
We have storms and we have waters.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Balls. Okay. Thanks, Phil.
Mr. Witherspoon, if you would come forward, and I've asked Tom to make a presentation on his ongoing and future capital projects.
Commission's aware we're doing this on about a 4-month increment, so we'll try to go through this quickly. We've got some idea of what we've got going on, and this is just a brief update of that. Project's completed. Again, this was our problem child tank with the contractor up in Unicoi with backwash tank. Just a editorial comment. This is why you put liquidated damages in a contract, and that you're prepared to exercise those liquidated damages. So the public was made whole through that contract. We have continued to try to add standby power to a number of our facilities. This was out at Carter Crossing, low-lying area, floods quite frequently, and we wanted to make sure we had standby power in for one of the wastewater stations. Tannery Knob, Commission's quite aware of this project. That's what the water tank looked like before we started the replacement of it. That was the ongoing replacement of it. That's after the tank is removed. Part of that removal and preparation for the new tank was stabilization of a rock wall and then creation on the south-facing portion of the slope of a engineered wall. That's the finished product on those two, and that's the finished product on the basically what is the foundation for the future tank. We are looking at 90+% plans and reviewing those, and we would hope to get that out for advertisement sometime in October and November. Things that are under construction, these are phased improvements at 2 of our 3 wastewater plants. At Knob Creek, we're going to incorporate old basins and utilize those for peak wet weather flows. To do that, we have to have a pumping station at off the head of the plant, and most of the photos you saw previously showed that station being excavated, coming up to grade. It's actually blocked and bricked in now. At Brush Creek, the key to improvements over there are conversion of the disinfectant that we're using, and major renovation or actually creation of a new solids handling building. Solids handling building is over to this left side, and that was a picture of that building prior to getting a roof put on it. That's what it looks like on the inside now. That is the disinfection building that's going up. We talked to you about the replacement of this older water tank we've got in part of our system. It was cheaper to replace the tank because of the engineering that was needed. Taller tank, same location, demolish this tank. That is a picture of the tank demolished. That is a picture of the site demolished, so you'll start to see this tank come up for construction. We anticipate having it completed by the end of this calendar year. Small tank, shouldn't be a big deal. We're phasing out 2 of the lift stations and also providing some service, additional customers that are in need of service. This project's about 51% complete. Part of it's off of East Lakeview near St. Mary's School, and part of it is over on Carroll Creek Road near Lakeview School.
Tom, what do you do exactly to phase out a lift station? Are you changing the flow gradient, or what are you doing?
A lift station, there are a percentage of our lift stations that were put in at a point in time when gravity flow was not available to the track, the development, or the area. Mm-hmm. And so the cost-effective solution at that time was to put in a pumping station, pump it down the road, and if eventually we have gotten around to running gravity to those, and so the stations go away. This is our neighborhood water line replacement activity that the Commission provided additional funding on previously. We're in the Hillcrest area. That's the area off of John Exum, below Science Hill, behind what used to be the Apex. They're actually currently working in that area now. This is the area that we're going to be replacing over in the Gump Addition. Just for a gee whiz, what that equates out to is about $4,000 to $8,000 per customer in an improvement to their water system out there. So it's a very necessary thing. We'll get a sign up and make sure everybody's aware who voted to pay for it.
It's very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Those of us who live right
Two
there.
of us.
Okay.
More than others.
You already heard about the work order system technology plan. That's going very well. It is time intensive to a number of employees that are actively involved in that. Awarded for construction, we've got two sewer rehab projects. One is Division Street from about where the city garage is at up to the old Paris building. The other is starting, and these are, I wouldn't say no dig, but they have a lot of lining with them. The other one starts at about Watauga near Johnson City Bedding and goes up to John Exum, and we've worked with both Carver Rec and also Mr. McLean with the Housing Authority to coordinate with some improvements that they're doing up on their development near John Exum. And these are actually starting now. We've got two more standby powers that we're trying to get in before the end of this year. Hunters Lake Commission approved that standby generator tonight. We've got another one at Indian Ridge. These will be installed by Force Count. Projects to be advertised. You talked about the area out on Cobb Creek. This is a new major 12-inch water line that was programmed in last year and this year to get to the wastewater plant. It's almost 10,000 feet. But it also will replace an older cast iron line that's in the area and have a fairly dramatic improvement in the fire protection down through there. Lark Street, we have money posted, it's designed, there'll be utilities built along the street whenever the street goes. Ford Creek Water Extension, I talked to one of the county commissioners today and gave them an update on where that was at. Our staff's been designing this. We believe that it'll be ready to bid sometime in October. Probably we'll get started in construction around the first of the year. Projects under design, Brush Creek. Two positive things on this. The appraisers are working on the easement appraisals. And I mentioned to Mr. Peterson the other day, you have a set of sewer line replacement documents that have been approved by the regulatory agencies, and that's extremely important. So they know the city is, besides just the water sewer staff and consultants saying, we are replacing this line and making this investment, they know that we're serious about doing that. Retrofitting the blower out the regional plant, Commission's recently approved some things on it. We will be bringing back to our next sewer rehab areas is a portion of the areas we talked about up parallel to Cherokee Road. A little bit of it's through Pine Oaks Golf Course, but you'll see a design contract on this sometime in October. And then, just as a reminder, we're running 4 construction crews in-house. They're always, we tend to be able to respond on, I would say 1,000 to 3,000 foot replacements, extensions, a little bit quicker than we can by going through the formal bidding process and using outside forces. But we've been up on East Austin replacing water lines. We got our line replaced up on Alpine off Austin Springs. We replaced about 3,000 feet on Orleans Street. We're trying to get that done. We're on Ramblin' Circle. A couple of extensions, one on Carroll Creek, one on Bristol Highway. And then we've got some other projects that are staging, and we try to stay on about a 4-month plan on those. So any questions y'all might have? Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
I'd like to point out 2 things. One, the importance of the standby power. if we lose power at a pump station, the likelihood of an overflow goes up dramatically. Those gen sets at those pump stations are crucial pieces of equipment. The second thing I want to point out is the importance of phasing out those pump stations. That is a continual electrical cost as well as an ongoing maintenance cost, and we save a lot of money in addition to virtually eliminating the possibility of an overflow every time we eliminate a pump station. So they're expensive to put in, but it's critical. But anytime you can eliminate one, it is an extremely significant accomplishment because you've done a lot to better ensure compliance with regulations and to prevent any environmental occurrence that may happen as a result of a power outage. Or as in relation to the previous presentation, when you start talking about 100-year rain events, no matter how good of an installation you get, almost every pipe will leak and you will get some level of infiltration, whether it's through a manhole lid or a pipe joint or something. And that whole drainage conveyance will only accommodate a certain capacity. And when it fills up, that water's going somewhere, and once it hits that sanitary sewer system, it's not clean water. So I just want to compliment Tom and his folks for the extraordinary job they do of trying to stay ahead of the game and to make sure that we're doing all of the preventative work that we can possibly do to prevent non-compliance with any of our regulations. So it's expensive, but it's absolutely mission critical in the world of wastewater.
How many pump stations do we maintain?
On the wastewater side, which is what Mr. Peterson's, we're right at about 100.
But we don't have backup generators at all of them, do we?
No, ma'am. We have backups. It's kind of a
Major
hierarchy.
ones.
The bigger ones, and then what we've begun to add is where they're sensitive, right near a stream, or as a result of not what's happened in Houston, but there was some thought given that if you had a major emergency event and you had to shelter people, they need to be able to flush the toilet. If they're flushing the toilet into the system and downstream's a lift station, you want to be able to pump that waste away from that area. So, okay. All right, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Tom.
Mayor, that brings you to public input in your agenda.
It kind of surprised me because I'd taken that off the agenda, but since it's on, we'll open up our public input. And I think we have a taker.
I think this may be public input. I'm Peg Pickens. I live on East 8th Avenue here in Johnson City. And I'm here because of the article I read in the paper last week, I believe it was, that there was to be a meeting tonight of a roundtable on renaming a city street to Martin Luther King Boulevard. According to the article that was in the paper, and I just clipped out a little bit of it, that mentioned the 3 streets that were under consideration. My first question is, are there only 3 streets under consideration by the city? And second question, have those been run by the NAACP, who I believe is the group that initiated this request that we rename a city Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard?
As to the meeting,
I believe the meeting was last
Thursday.
and it was at Memorial
Yeah.
Park. And I think that I was not at the meeting, but heard report of it later, that they invited public comment. I think 30 or 40 different people came, and they left the meeting with about as much clarity as they commenced it with. And so I think the committee is, the task force that is charged with that is reconvening at some, and I apologize, I don't know when.
And it was the planning commission that did that, not us. The planning commission was having that for the renaming, and then they bring it to us when they come up with something.
That topic is not in front of the commission right now. It's with the task force.
Okay, so how do I pursue that?
Well, they will meet again.
They will meet again, and it'll be a publicly noticed meeting. And so, watch, go ahead.
If I may intervene, if you would see Mr. Wilson, the gentleman there in the green tie, and give him your contact information, I'll make sure that staff gets a hold of you tomorrow and gives you the details of when the next meeting is and the time and the location and everything that you would need. We'd be
Or if you
glad to
think you
help
might know somebody up here that has your phone number, they might call you and let you know when they find out.
It's 2 out of 3, what can I say?
Yeah, so it's still 2 steps away from this body, so the task force is working with it, then it would come to the planning commission, and then theoretically continue through to this group.
My big consternation was that I checked with the community center yesterday. It was on their calendar for tonight, and they had had no contact, that it had been canceled, rescheduled, or...
It was last week. I mean, Commissioner Van Brockman was there, and I was there.
I was there, too.
Yeah. So it was. But the task force has been commissioned by the Planning Commission, and a group of it's a good
People in the community
representation,
and
that are on
Planning
the
Commission
task
people.
force. And they've been working hard, so.
Okay.
But
Alrighty.
the next step will be to go back
To the planning
to the Planning
commission after the
Commission.
task.
Well, the task force still hasn't
more
coalesced
meeting.
So
around
they
the
don't have a
recommendation.
recommendation yet.
And so I think that means there's still opportunity for them to hear further input. And then once they would coalesce around a single recommendation, then it would go to the planning commission, and then it would come theoretically to us.
Does it come to us? I thought the Planning Commission.
No,
had the
renaming,
authority.
the city commission has not delegated to the planning commission the authority to rename. They,
Just to
so when
name.
the planning commission named the VA Access Road Gold Star Boulevard, that was because it didn't have a name previously.
All right, thank
I
you.
learned
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the meeting tonight.
Learned something. We understand.
Yeah, we started at 4:30.
We think so, too.
Anybody else wish to address the commission? I will close public comment. Yeah, that brings us to the end of our agenda.
Motion to adjourn, or?
Well, anybody have anything they'd like to
Science Hill plays Greenville, #1 ranked 4A team in the state tomorrow night here in Johnson City. So weather's supposed to be great. Everybody ought to come out for that game.
I'll be there.
Just a reminder to everybody, we have pizza evaluation that's due on the 15th. So if you get those in to Steve Willis, and I believe on that next Monday, the 18th, Pete, you'd like to talk with the commission at our agenda review meeting. We'll get that on there and get that in.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
And just congratulations to ETSU. We've got a couple of milestones. Played the first game in the new stadium. It was beautiful and less than beautiful weather, but that didn't seem to damper the spirits of those in attendance. And
Everybody showed up. It was great.
looks like everybody showed up. And then tomorrow we break ground on the Fine and Performing Arts Center. So at 4 o'clock, come on out and see that.
Do we have gold shovels?
Well, I hope so.
You can't do that without gold
can't,
shovels. We need like 20 gold shovels.
No, but you do have to sing.
Sure that
You have to
the
sing,
university
Joe.
has thought through that.
We check on that tomorrow.
Anybody else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you.